Budget 2025 comes with a whopping $78 billion deficit. Parliament's budget watchdog says that digging out of the hole will be harder than the Liberal government is letting on.
We think that the definition the government's used around capital investments is overly expansive. And in particular, they've thrown some things in there, some categories of spending, which other jurisdictions in other countries would not typically include.
Under Mark Carney, the budget is split into operational costs, day-to-day expenses like the salaries of public servants, versus capital investments, such as long-term funding for major projects.
The United States has changed. That's their right. We must respond. That is our imperative. And the budget builds Canada strong by focusing on what we can control.
Despite the record deficit, the finance minister says the government will balance the operating side in 3 years and shrink the deficit to GDP ratio starting next year.
100% of our MPs oppose the costly Carney credit card budget.
The government's categorization of $311 billion in capital investments is significantly higher than the watchdog's number of $217 billion. It's a difference of $94 billion that the budget officer says should be added to operational costs, making it less likely for the government to balance that side of the ledger.
In fact, over the 5-year horizon, the operating budget would not be balanced at all.
The budget watchdog is recommending that an independent expert panel determine what exactly is a capital investment, given how subjective the definition can be. Meanwhile, on Monday, parliamentarians return for another confidence vote on the budget.
Well, if Jason Jacques is going down, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, he is going down in a blaze of glory. A Sunday special again for the weekend wrap, a little more casual today. But boy, oh boy, is this a story and a continuation of yesterday's weekend wrap show. Jason Jacques this weekend has been out there firing on all cylinders about this budget. I mean, there are political scandals, there are budget controversies, and then there is whatever in God's name the Parliamentary Budget Officer just uncovered inside Mark Carney's so-called Canada Strong budget. The number is staggering. A budget so strong it needed $94 billion of buried, mislabeled, misallocated accounting trickery to keep the deficit from detonating on impact. Boy, $94 billion, folks. $94 billion. That's not a rounding error. That's not a misplaced decimal. That is the GDP of a small country vanishing inside our own federal books because the Liberals decided that if you put enough lipstick on a pig, maybe Canadians won't notice it's still oinking. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things. It is the weekend wrap, a Sunday special, and the best part of all of this, the man who exposed all of this stuff is not even partisan. He's not a conservative loyalist, so don't jump in the comments. He's not even a loud voice. The interim Parliamentary Budget Officer, Jason Jacques, is the definition of calm, factual, numbers-driven. He's a professional. But let me tell you something. If Jacques is going down, he sure as hell is going down in a blaze of glory. Because before Mark Carney can shove him out the back door, Jacques is making crystal clear just how grotesquely distorted this budget actually is in terms of its numbers. Now, he found tens of billions. Now, we're talking $94 billion classed incorrectly as investments when they really belong in the operating side of the ledger. Now, color me shocked that this happened. Who among us is really truly surprised? But no, this isn't some technical quibble. This isn't a philosophical disagreement between economists. This is the literal backbone of how deficits are truly calculated. And anything shoved into the investment side suddenly doesn't count in the same way toward operational spending, which means your deficit magically looks smaller. He already left out all the submarine budgets to keep the deficit smaller. Now your fiscal anchor magically looks intact, and your political headlines magically talk about strength instead of chaos. This is budget laundering. That's exactly what it is. This is a financial alchemy. This is the kind of creative accounting that if a publicly traded company did it, Bay Street would be demanding criminal charges by lunchtime. But here's the real bombshell, because the real bombshell isn't actually in the number itself of 94 billion. It's the PBO's conclusion here that the budget is so radical, so unprecedented, and so outside international norms that Canada needs an independent panel to review it before it passes. It's almost absolutely necessary at this point. Now, think about what has to happen in a democracy before someone steps up and says, you know what, we better pause everything here. Someone independent should probably check the math. Think about how far things have to slide before the watchdog of Parliament is practically standing there screaming and waving a red flag, honking an air horn, lighting fireworks, and yelling to everyone who is willing to listen, do not trust this government's numbers. Something is wrong. And that right there is why Mark Carney must be squirming in his $1,000 silk nightgown, like it's lined with porcupine quills, because the only thing this government cannot tolerate is true independence. Not advisory panels they stacked themselves, not experts they personally recruited, not commissions whose terms of reference were written by Liberal comm staff. No. Carney loves a good independent panel only when he can influence that panel. I guess that's not all that independent, is it, Mark? Only when he can choreograph the outcome. Only when the conclusion is already written before the questioning even begins. Think CBC. Think CTV. Think Global News, the Globe and Mail, Toronto Sun. All paid off. What he does not love is something truly independent, truly at arm's length, and truly capable of saying, excuse me, Mr. Prime Minister, your budget numbers are not adding up here. Please return to the calculator and try again. Because that, and let's be very blunt here, is exactly what Jason Jacques' review is starting to reveal. And it gets even better because Jacques pointed out that some of these classifications are so bizarre that other countries literally don't allocate this way at all, meaning that Carney didn't just stretch the envelope, he set the envelope on fire, taped it back together, painted a smiley face on it, and hoped no one asked any questions about the way he was managing things. And same with Francois Philippe Champagne, or Screechy for short. So today, in our little Sunday special, let's talk about why independent review panels are so critical in this case, and critical to democracy at this point. And we're going to pull some real global examples of this, because unlike the Liberal government, we don't actually fear the scrutiny, we embrace it. And history shows that independent panels, in fact, when allowed to operate freely, can change entire nations for the better and for their long-term future. So here, let's take a look, because this has worked before. There's a reason Jason Jacques is suggesting that an independent panel be asked to review this budget, because independent review panels exist for one reason and one reason only: to protect you, the Canadian citizen, from governments who think their political survival is more important than the actual truth. They force the government to be transparent. They force the government to be accurate, and they force the government to be disciplined. That's what independent is all about. When a government knows an outside body will audit their claims, their numbers, their assumptions, their timelines, and their projections, they behave a little differently. They think twice. They don't get to bury things somewhere in the budget on the wrong side of the ledger. They don't get to hide things. They don't get to reclassify $94 billion of spending and call it innovative. But when there is no independent review, well, that's when the government is allowed to self-police its own numbers. And that's not okay. That is when democracies drift into fantasy, into overspending like we've seen for over a decade now, into distortions within the numbers in the budget, and into the kind of magical thinking that leads straight to economic ruin. Jason Jacques called this stupefying already, and he's right. Canada needs this kind of panel more than ever, because we are living inside the fog of this Carney government. They love the fog, manufactured illusion. And it's really the only antidote here is sunlight to burn off that fog. Real sunlight, not the curated data drop variety that Justin Trudeau perfected and Mark Carney has now taken to Olympian levels. And now let's walk through, because I want you to hear 5 examples of proof, because we always get held accountable for this, and that's great in the comments. So I want to give you 5 moments where independent panels saved countries from themselves, okay? Because there are great examples of this. The first example would be in the UK, the Office for Budget Responsibility. It was created after a crisis, and it absolutely worked. In 2010, the UK created the Office for Budget Responsibility because politicians simply could not be trusted to grade their own homework anymore. Every forecast was wrong. Every deficit projection was wrong. And it was rosy as well. They tried to play it up as everything looks great, don't worry about it. Every number was political. So the UK said, you know what, enough is enough with the partisanship. The OBR now independently verifies all economic assumptions, all revenue projections, and all deficit forecasts. And what's the result since this has happened? A massive improvement in fiscal transparency in the UK, investor confidence as well, and market stability. Even when governments hate what the OBR says, they can't touch it, and the public trusts it more than the actual cabinet itself. This is exactly the model Canada needs right now, which is probably why Mark Carney wants nothing to do with it. He looks at his former alma mater, the UK, and goes, holy crap, hopefully they don't bring those things here. Well, guess what? We're on to you, and now we're talking about it. So here's example 2, which is Australia's Parliamentary Budget Office, a global gold standard, though, in parliamentary budget officers. We have one, of course, but Australia saw the writing on the wall long before Canada did. They created an independent budget office with ironclad powers to review fiscal policy, costing, spending, and projections. Politicians in Australia don't like being told their numbers are wrong, but too bad. That's how they keep their democracy honest in Australia. And I didn't say that Australia or the UK are running their countries perfectly. That is always up to the government overall. But these independent offices, the results speak for themselves. Australia weathered global downturns better than most countries because their assumptions weren't fantasies. They were tested, they were challenged, and they were verified. Imagine if Canada had that right now. Imagine when we could challenge something and verify it as well. Imagine if someone stopped us from driving $94 billion right off the cliff out in Nova Scotia and pretending it was a scenic detour. No. If we could stop that, holy cow, would this country be in better shape. Now, number 3, I want to point out, again, over by Australia, but over to New Zealand, their independent fiscal institution, the Guardians of Transparency. See, New Zealand underwent sweeping reform after major fiscal scandals in both the 80s and the 90s. They learned the hard way that political math always benefits the politician, always, never the public. So they created a system of independent review for all major fiscal plans, ensuring that deficits cannot be hidden now somewhere within the budget. Wouldn't that be nice? And spending classifications can't be used as political tools instead. And today, New Zealand routinely ranks among the most transparent and accountable public finance systems in the entire world. Good for New Zealand. That is awesome. It's almost like independent panels, I don't know, work. Oh boy. Well, Mark, we got to have one come for this, because if these things work, we need the help. That's what we need in Canada right now. But if you need more examples, we've got 2 more. Example number 4, the European Union's fiscal councils. They're watchdogs with teeth because they actually have power. The European Union requires member states to maintain independent fiscal councils, bodies specifically tasked with scrutinizing budgets, projections, and all of their debt levels as well, scrutinized right down to the penny. These councils have forced change. They've corrected dishonest budgets. They've stopped governments from overspending in many cases. They've forced revisions and reinstatements or restatements, and transparency is the biggest key to all of this. Are we starting to notice a pattern behind having independent people look at things, guys? Yeah, we are. The transparency of it all. Imagine if Canada had this kind of oversight right now, instead of a prime minister trying to shove a parliamentary budget officer into the closet. It's not going to happen. And now he's trying to hire another parliamentary budget officer who will just kowtow to him. I don't think so. South Korea's the final example here, their National Assembly Budget Office. South Korea created this budget office, an independent budget office that routinely forces governments to revise their numbers when the math isn't adding up. Wouldn't that be nice? They evaluate everything from spending, revenue growth, assumptions, debt trajectories, and they have become so respected that when they speak, the markets in their country listen. How crazy is that? Their review mechanisms, while quite different, have corrected course time and time again with that country, especially during global financial shocks. They've been able to weather them very easily, which we used to do here in Canada. Canada could use some of that backbone right now. There is no question about that. So here's what we need to think about. Why does Carney fear all of this? Because he clearly does not want Jason Jacques talking. He also clearly does not want the independent panel. And it's probably because an independent review panel would expose everything he is trying to hide in this budget. It would reveal whether the deficit is actually $78 billion, and I think we're all starting to realize it's not, because it would also reveal whether it's closer to $120 billion once you undo all of the reclassification tricks. It would reveal whether his so-called long-term growth plan is anything more than just smoke and mirrors and frivolous spending. It would actually reveal whether this government is massively understating the financial damage that they have done and are doing to future generations. And it would obviously reveal that the Canada Strong budget might as well be renamed to the Canada Pretend budget, perhaps, because none of the numbers survive outside the four walls of liberal political spin. And most importantly of all, it would force, and I mean force, Carney to defend his decisions with facts. Can you imagine? Not feelings. Transparency is Mark Carney's kryptonite. Accountability is his biggest allergy. Independent panels are his absolute nightmare. So yes, Jason Jacques is going down swinging, and he's swinging hard, and we cheer him on. Standing ovation, Jason. But he's doing something much bigger than protecting his legacy. He's protecting the institution of Parliament itself. He is reminding Canadians that truth still matters, that numbers still matter, and that democracy still matters in this country in some way. And if the Liberals want to get rid of him for telling the truth, fine. But they will never erase what he's exposed here. Boy, oh boy, has he done a great job. So here's the thing. Quiet part out loud. That's what Jason Jacques has said. Canada needs independent review now, more than ever, because this government has proven it cannot be trusted with any of the truth in this country, budgetary or otherwise. Think about the housing plan. Think about tax cuts. Think about the carbon tax that's just paused. Nothing is coming out that's the truth, and that needs to change. Thanks for watching the Sunday special of the Weekend Wrap. We will be back tomorrow morning on Monday morning with the first sip, of course, and then obviously the last word at the end of the day. We've got another potential vote tomorrow on this budget. This is going to be interesting to see if they actually can bring this government down, if they even are willing to bring this government down, and what happens with this confidence vote tomorrow. Really looking forward to it. Let's do it all together. Don't forget to post in the comments your thoughts on all of this. Is Jason Jacques making you want to stand up and cheer by the fact that he is just blowing this whole thing up over the weekend? I know I'm pretty impressed. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.